Welcome to Connecting to Admired Leadership, where twice a month we explore the behaviors and routines that make great leaders extraordinary. I'm Wes Bender, and I have the distinct pleasure of hosting some of our firm's partners, coaches, and clients to discuss leadership in ways you won't hear anywhere else. Let's dive into this episode and make people and situations better together. We've got folks dropping in for our Connecting to Admired Leadership webinar today. We're starting a minute late. I apologize. We had a huge number of people in the waiting room, waiting, chomping at the bit to hear some great wisdom from Suzanne, especially around our topic today. And Suzanne and I were just chatting. We were trying to catch up, so I apologize. We've gotten a little bit late start today. Would love to know. We've got the chat box open, and as always, we'll be utilizing that throughout our time. Would love to know who you are, where you're from. Drop that in the chat box. Of course, we have lots of people who attend these live in order to just network a little bit behind the scenes and meet some other folks, meet folks behind the scenes. So we'd love for you to do that. I'd also love for you to drop in the chat box when you do that. If you've ever worked or interacted with someone who had an opinion on everything, whether they actually knew anything about whatever topic was being discussed or not. Have you ever worked with or interacted with somebody? So who are you? Where are you from? I see many of you already dropping that in. Texas, Seattle. Fantastic to have you guys here today. As you're dropping that in the chat box, along with the name and maybe phone number and contact information of the person who has an opinion on everything. No, not really. Don't put their names in there. But as you do that, I want to introduce many of you who've been on our webinars in the past or you've listened to the recordings. Dr. Suzanne Peterson. Again, I think we had a huge turnout of registrants for this particular one because Suzanne, in my opinion, is just simply brilliant. And I think a lot of other people feel the same way. But here's some perspective that maybe I haven't shared in the past. She's worked with Fortune 500 executives for over 2 decades, helping them move from here's what I think to here's what you might not be seeing. Something I see Suzanne do all the time. She works and coaches leaders not by telling them what to do, but by expanding how they see their challenges and opportunities. What makes Suzanne especially valuable for today's conversation around leaders give perspective more than they give opinions is that she doesn't just teach this concept, she embodies it. Suzanne, in every coaching conversation that I've ever been a part of or a dialogue with you, you help leaders understand the difference between imposing their view and opening up to new ways of thinking. And it's a really distinguishing characteristic of our coaching versus some of the other coaching that you might see today. And of course, that's exactly the skill we're going to be exploring today. Sophie's with us behind the scenes, so she'll be dropping some things in the chat box along the way. Sophie, if you could go ahead and drop the field note in regards to this topic, that would be fantastic. Thank you for doing that. Let's get started. Just to start out, Suzanne, as always, thanks for being with us. Who are you, for those that may not have heard from you in the past on these webinars, and what are you currently loving about what you do? Who are you? What are you currently loving about what you do?
Well, thanks, Wes, and thanks, Sophie, and everybody. Glad to have you here. I'm Suzanne Peterson, been with the firm, 25 years now, a partner in the firm. Spend most of my time either coaching leaders one-on-one, working in group facilitation, doing some speaking, but overall just trying to bring this message of admired leadership to life and helping making people in situations better, which is really the mission of the firm and behind the scenes. What I love what I'm doing right now is I think more than ever, I'm working with teams and individuals that are already absolutely at the top of their game and just want to get 20% better, 10% better. Even this week, worked with a team, and the leader said, "This is a fantastic team operating at all cylinders, and we'd like to have a 4-hour facilitation and offsite to make them better." Well, that's pretty cool. Now it's a challenge. And because, you have to sit there and think that's a lot easier when there's a lot of problems to try and fix them. But that's really fun because that's what we believe we're about. High performance coaching. We believe we're helping people all the time, but really fun when you're asked to spend a lot of time with a team that's already operating. And the only thing I'll correct about what you said, Wes, before you said, don't tell leaders what to do. I try and get them to have perspectives. I do often tell them what to do. Okay, I need to, and hopefully they appreciate that when I do that. But that's what I'm loving right now.
I love that. That's awesome. And just to echo what you said, and I think today's topic's a great example of that. We work with leaders in the margins. We're looking on that, we're working with that top 10% to make the small tweaks of leadership that are highly practical, that have a lot of utility with them. And it's a fun place to play. I mean, when you can take a leader who's already knocking it out of the park in a lot of ways and make them just the teensiest. It's amazing the influence that has across the organization, both personally and professionally. So let's jump into our topic. And I don't know if you've been scrolling through the chat box, but we've got folks that are saying where they're from, of course, all over the world. And then we're getting a pretty solid response that people have worked with others or interacted with others who have an opinion on everything. We've got some things that say yes, 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 absolutely, exclamation points, all those kind of things. So let's just start, if you can, just contrast opinion versus perspective. I think it's something we normally wouldn't look at, but there is a distinct difference. So just kind of frame that up for us.
Yeah, if you know people are really opinionated, you'll recognize it right away. But still, the nuance between perspective and opinion, not always as clear, but I think I can, make it a little more simple. So an opinion generally is your immediate reaction, a fast judgment. It's grounded in your feelings, how I feel about this. It's based on values at times. It can be quite personal and it's quite biased, right?
Mhm.
Immediate reaction. I feel we shouldn't do that, right? I feel we need to prioritize, right? So it is based in your bias, values, right? All those things. And one thing about it is that often can shut down conversations, especially if you're a leader, right? Because if you're a leader of a team and you have a really strong opinion, maybe everybody goes, well, I'm not going to bother to weigh in.
Yep.
So opinion, that makes sense. We hear people that have strong opinions all the time or people that don't weigh in enough. Perspective, on the other hand, a much broader view, often based in data. I've gathered this. It raises more questions than answers. So, for example, in an opinion, you might say, hey, this is what I believe we need to do. This is what I think is right. A perspective might be more, here's something to consider.
Hmm.
Have you considered looking at it this way? Have you considered it could be this versus that, as opposed to, I don't think that's the way to go. I don't think that's what we should do. It's, have you considered if we prioritize this instead of that? So often that's not just coming from an emotional reaction. We've gathered data, we have contrary views, we've explored some assumptions. So you can see where that's particularly powerful in a group setting,
Yeah.
to get the group thinking. That's it.
Yeah. How diving a little bit deeper into that, how does one offer or invite someone to gain or shift perspective? How do you go about that? How do you offer a perspective without your opinion getting in the way? I mean, you mentioned how you frame it, of course, and how it comes across, but how do you invite someone to gain or shift perspective, offer a perspective without your opinion, getting in the way of them hearing your perspective?
Yeah, part of it is you have to slow down a little bit, right?
Mhm.
Because again, remember, opinions are often immediate reaction and we're a little quick to offer them. But if I just give an example, if somebody said, here's the problem, how do we solve it? And you said, I think we need to prioritize speed over perfection. We can't be perfect, just we have to get there faster. There's my opinion. It's my immediate reaction, grounded in bias, grounded in my feelings towards something, advocacy. If on the other hand, I said, one lens to look at this is through the lens of speed versus perfection. What trade-offs would we be making if we did that? Now, I'm still kind of leading that I'm thinking this way, so it's not dishonest or disingenuous in any way, but I
Mhm.
am opening it up more. So I'm shifting this mindset. What would this look like if we looked at it from a marketing view, right?
Mhm.
If we started over or started from scratch, how might we do things differently? So you may very strongly, you may have a view and you may have an opinion, but rather because probably we're trying to get to shift people to say, I'm open, I want to make the solution better. And so that basic idea of taking every time you're about to assert an opinion and you think maybe perspective is better here because I want to open this up, see if you can't switch it to either a question, how would this look if we took a different view? What if we looked at this from a talent perspective versus a process perspective? What would change there? right? So now you may be thinking, gosh, we need to be looking at this from a talent perspective. I think we're looking at this the wrong way. Notice
Hmm.
instead, I just said, what would change if we looked at it from that view?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I have a perspective that may or may not be right. It's trying to broaden this, it's trying to get data, it's trying to say I've put thought versus that instant reaction.
I love that. I laugh a little bit. It immediately comes to mind. My oldest, Jackson, is looking at colleges. He's a senior in high school this year. He's writing these college essays for scholarships and all these kind of things. And he's written one recently that I think is really, really good. And it really shows how he thinks. It really presents himself well and all those kind of things. And my wife hates it. And I use hate intentionally there. And so yesterday we're out for a walk. We've scheduled with Jackson, my son, to talk to him last night. And my wife and I are out for a walk, and she shares this with me. She goes, I want to talk to you about his essay. I said, okay. I was like, isn't it great? You know, all this. She goes, I really don't like it at all. And so we began to talk about, well, how do we approach Jackson with this? We've got very different perspectives. And she turns to me, Suzanne, and I'm going to pose this question to you with that. She turns to me, she says, when is it okay for me to tell him my opinion though? Right?
Yeah.
When is it why do I always have to do this song and dance around him? Now she's an attorney, mind you, so that's just the way her mind operates in a lot of ways. But I think that question was really good. If and when is it appropriate to offer your opinion on things? If some of us are used to that, how would we answer that?
Yeah, certainly we don't want to imply opinions are bad. There's probably three situations where you need to offer them. And it's funny, Wes, I was thinking about that too. I have a brand new driver, 16-year-old, had her license under 3 weeks. My opinion is I don't think you should drive at night right now. Night on the weekends, it's too safe, it's unsafe. There's a lot going on, so I'm just, no, you can't drive on the weekends. You're too inexperienced of a driver. She does not like this message. Right. So instead, I switched it yesterday as I was thinking about it. I said, instead of looking at this as you want to have fun, be out with your friends. Let's look at this from a lens of safety, what the insurance company, says when, driving after a certain time of night. Let's look at that. Now, again, 16, so you're not going to make
Right,
it
sure.
basically, but I was practicing. Um, but nevertheless, opinions are really important when something's time sensitive. Like
Mm,
you can't just be sitting there like, here's something we might consider. And, have you thought of these assumptions? If something is extremely time sensitive, I have to make the call. And you basically say, here's what we're doing. This is why. Here's my view. This is what I decided. Like you
mm,
just urgency, is of the essence where we are not deliberating. Um, Also, you know what frustrates people? If you don't give an opinion when they're asking for your opinion.
mm,
Sometimes, again, group setting, let's brainstorm, let's think through this, let's look through perspectives. If someone says, what do you think I should do? Now we'll talk about a nuance of that. Not that a leader should always just feed you what you should do. But the idea is sometimes people, they want your judgment. They want your perspective. Imagine if they said, what do you think we should do? And you were like, well, maybe we could look at this from a couple lenses. Have you considered, now there's a time and place for that, but people are saying, like, I've already thought about this. What's your view? Right?
mhm,
Then you might, rather than saying, here's some angles to consider, they don't really want that. They go, I think you should do this. Now, it's always good to preface it with, hey, I might not be right. I'm just one view. My personal opinion is you should do X, but that's if it were me, right?
mm,
I think there is a difference between saying, if I were you, I would do this. People feel that as more directive than, hey, if it were me or if I was in your shoes, I'd think about it this way. You're asking for a direct opinion. That's mine. Doesn't mean there aren't others out there. So again, don't play with people if they really are at a point like I need to make the call and I want your judgment.
mm,
And the third area might be very high stakes, right? A very high stakes where, again, you can't really afford to deliberate, take time. So that's related to the time issue. But there are certain things where you may say, it would be great if this were 2 weeks early and I could gather perspectives, but the stakes are too high if we get this wrong, if we delay. And so you have to move on it.
I
But I
love
think
that.
the key, Wes, is that it's not that opinions are ever bad. Oftentimes, perspectives come early, opinions come when it's decision time.
Hmm.
So when you have the beauty of time and you have the benefit of time, let's get perspectives. It's early on. Let's brainstorm. Let's think through. Have you thought of? Have you considered? If it's go time, right? High stakes decision, we need an answer. That's where opinions come in. So if you're sensing I'm at a decision point and we have to make it, you need to have an opinion.
Yep.
If not, have a perspective. You have time.
That's so helpful. Those three things that you just dug into there. And because I think we do have leaders, and my wife being one of them, that gets frustrated because she's like, can I never express my opinion? But the ability to come back with, well, yes, you absolutely can. Here's some ways to do that and to balance that. So we had a lot of questions come in ahead of time, and I know we just had one come in the chat box. I want to remind everybody, feel free if you're attending live. That's one of the benefits of this to drop some questions. We'll get to those as quick as we can. And you've mentioned some of this, Suzanne, but I wonder if there's anything else that you could go deeper with. And I love how this person started this question. It says, my bad habit is wanting to help with solutions. A natural tendency there, and as leaders, we're probably all in the same way. I know that shifting from giving opinions to offering perspectives will feel mechanical at first. What are some key question stems or conversation starters that can help me practice staying in perspective mode when my natural tendency is to offer solutions? And I'm going to add to that a little bit as you think through how we could create some practicality for those listening into that now. But that's one of the things that we talk about a lot at Admired Leadership. Lots of things feel mechanical at first. They feel out of the way you've always done them. But the more you do them, eventually they become in the rhythm of actually who you are when you show up to situations. So, what does that look like for this particular circumstance? Both, what are some key things that you could do when it's feeling mechanical at first, and then over time, will this get natural for people to lean in to offer their perspectives when they're used to offering opinions?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you said it, which is most new behaviors when you take them on can feel a little mechanical or even inauthentic. Sometimes we hear that word. Like it's just, I'm just somebody I'm going to give my opinion. I don't want to take the time to do this perspective thing. Like it feels like something I'm having to work through. But keep in mind that, authenticity is more about range, meaning we always have to take on new behaviors and always have to try things that might not be comfortable initially, but after 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, right after time, they become more of who we are. What we're always telling people when we're taking on new behaviors is if you're asked to take on a new behavior that feels so foreign to you, so outside your range of who you are, obviously you're welcome to ignore that behavior. If it's just slightly uncomfortable, mechanical, "Ugh, gosh, I don't normally do that. Normally I do talk more than I listen. Normally I don't ask questions, I make statements, right? Whatever it is, that's something worth practicing for you, then it will become more habit.
Mm-hmm.
So I think with this one, there's probably a couple, for people that kind of like a framework or like a little bit of a cheat sheet for how to think about it. There's a few different, maybe I'll give you three that you could think about if you're immediately saying, I want to practice perspective. So every time you have an opinion, a beginning to a question that would switch from the opinion to the perspective might be, what lens are we looking at this from?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So be thinking like, is that one way you could go? I'm about to offer an opinion on that we should, focus on cost here. But instead of saying that, I might say, what's the lens we're looking at this from? Is it cost? Is it aesthetics? Is it quality? Is it time? Right. You might even lead them a little bit, but so that's one, what lens is this? The other is if we thought of this as an X problem instead of a Y problem, how would we approach it differently? So again,
Mm-hmm.
you could instead, I'm about to offer an opinion, but instead I go and say, if we think about this as a service problem rather than a process problem, how would we approach it differently? That might be a third one. And the other one, which is common, especially if a leader's involved or other senior stakeholders, is what, or somebody that has a really strong opinion or a cool perspective might be, what would X person say that we're not seeing? Like,
Yeah.
what might our manager say that we're not seeing? What might that senior stakeholder over there say that we're not seeing? Fourth one, maybe, what are we optimizing for? Like, I'm trying to understand what's important. So
Mm-hmm.
again, those are maybe four categories. I'll just say them one more time. Like if you're thinking, okay, fine, every time I have an opinion, I'm going to try and frame a question which comes into a perspective in one of four ways. What lens are we using? If we thought about it as an X problem instead of a Y problem, then what would this person or someone in this role say, or what are we optimizing for?
Mm-hmm.
Those are probably four really, strong categories, or just the broad one. What are we trying to achieve with this? What's another way we could be looking at this?
Yeah.
All those are ways to take even something with Jackson, even with the teenager, and say, if I were to move into perspective, Versus, by the way, your wife isn't wrong. Maybe she needs to offer an opinion if this essay's due tomorrow, right? Like there is some time sensitive. I don't have time to go, maybe if we looked at it from an X lens instead, like you got to get this done and go to bed, right? So my opinion is it's too long and you're focused on the wrong things,
Yeah. My
right?
if and when my wife Leanne listens to this, the only thing she's going to take away is you saying your wife's not wrong. That's going to be her one takeaway from the entire
Yeah.
conversation. So I want to chat a little bit more about those four things that you just outlined are huge. And I would agree with Justine in the chat box who was saying, hey, there's some pieces here that need to be a field note moving forward as a deeper dive into some of those things. I want to dive a little bit deeper into how to bring different perspectives into a room. And you systematize that way. And one of the things I heard you say that I hadn't thought of before is sometimes we bucket every perspective into one category that is just a different perspective. But there's almost a next level deeper in looking at what are the different perspectives related to process, related to departments, related to all those kind of things. Have you ever is there a case or something out there where that really helped a situation? And then how do you go about that? Because I think that's really, really important. Is when I'm bringing a different perspective in the room, it's not just, you know, what I think about this and what you think about this. It's more, am I thinking about this from lots of different angles that could be taking place?
Yeah, I think what you bring up, and it reminds me of something that Randall, our founder, was focused on recently when we were all in a meeting together, which is because we're so quick, we are biased toward our opinions and biased toward our assumptions that we don't often explore. Again, when we have the time, we don't
Mhm,
often explore that there could be different assumptions or different things driving. So, for example. If I were just simply to say, I reached out to a client, and the client didn't get back to me,
mhm,
right? I might say, yeah, my view is they're just not that interested right now,
mhm,
right? So that just didn't, that they're not really serious about it right now. Well, that's my opinion, right? But maybe if I asked around, someone would say, maybe they're just really busy. Like it is feedback season. Two, maybe like the decision maker wasn't in the room, or three, maybe your proposal was just too long and
mhm,
maybe you shouldn't have sent it through email. Aren't they kind of more of a, or, there could be an infinite number of reasons why that's happening.
mhm,
Therefore, when you think about it that way, this really comes into play with perspectives. We're about to have an opinion which is inherently biased, right? Inherently based on my assumption and my view of the situation. So if I were to go to Wes and that and say, listen, I reached out, the client seemed really interested in doing some things, but they just aren't getting back to me. He might say, oh, well, you know what I think it is, right? I think it's just, sending those on Fridays. I always tend to get that issue, right? I try and follow up next week with a different day of the week. Now, that's just one perspective, right? Or one opinion. But as I go through that, you have to kind of ask yourself before I assert an opinion, what am I assuming here?
yeah, that's good. That's really good. Yeah. So those of you who might utilize our incredible AI executive coach, Alex, which stands for Admired Leadership Excellence, want to remind you that Alex does this very, very well. My daughter, who is 13 now in middle school, which is just in our culture, it's just a horrible place to put people is in middle school, I feel like, in so many different ways. So she's coming home and having arguments with friends, all those kind of things. And every time she comes to me, I immediately go to solve it. Your friend said this? That's horrible. You shouldn't, because I've got a bias towards my daughter, right? All those kind of things. Well, my wife, going back, said, you ought to put that in Alex and give Alex the context and then ask Alex for 20 different things that could be happening, right? Outside of this to get to the root of the problem of what's actually happening, give perspective. And I did that, and then I got so mad because what I wanted to do is just, solve the problem for my daughter just like she had. But it opened up a whole new world of actually getting to the root of what's actually happening and the understanding there. It's a very simple piece, but it goes back so much to what you've been saying in regards to how teams, leaders can get so much better in regards to perspective. So I want to give you a chance to kind of give any closing remarks or any encouragement as we're already at the hour. But as you do that, I'm going to go ahead and have Sophie. We never able to get to all the questions. Again, if you're attending live, Sophie will drop in there if you want to book a 10-minute quick conversation so we can hear your particular circumstance. We can certainly do that, give you some quick advice. Then also, we are going to be in Boston. That's our next on location event. So we bring these type of dialogues on location, meet folks in the area. We're going to be in Boston November 12th. She'll put that in the chat box as well. And then, of course, all of our events we have coming up. We are gearing up for our 2026 webinar series as well, and those are going to be up for registration sooner than later, which we're real excited about. We have such a great time doing these. So, Suzanne, any last thoughts, question, or anything you might encourage the leaders listening to this recording or attending with us live today?
Well, on the middle school front, my only advice is this worked really well. I told my daughter from the beginning, middle school is just something to survive. You just
Isn't that a horrible thing though? It's so
You know
true.
what? It worked. She was
But
like, "Oh, you did tell me it would be bad." I'm like, "Yep." So now she's in high school. She survived it. Um, but on the work front, I think one thing to remember too is offering perspectives. Not only does that maybe make you a better decision maker, make you more deliberate and intentional, it makes your team better. So keep in mind, if they get used to hearing you ask for perspectives, if you're always offering an opinion, guess what? Your team just goes, "You'll give me the answer. I'll go to you," and they get lazy. If you offer more perspectives, they learn, hey, now I'm getting better at understanding trade-offs. I'm asking better questions. My leader's teaching me different dimensions to consider. So they'll be listening and watching you in those group settings, and then they'll go to their teams and move in their career and get better at saying, I need to be a better decision maker. So I'm going to ask for perspectives, and my leaders taught me how to do that. Another
yeah.
important benefit.
I got someone in the chat box that was like, "Oh, they just quoted you. Middle school is something to survive. Love this." I think that's helping all of us with middle
Right.
schoolers.
You can't tell them it's
Um,
going to be great. It's just a lie.
it's just a lie. It'll be okay. No, it won't. It's middle school. It will not be.
Right. They love that. It helps when they're finished with it. Like you did tell me.
That's hilarious. Suzanne, as always, thank you so much. Sophie, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to also get you, if you could just drop in, we got a question in the chat box in regards to how to access Alex. If you'll just drop in there, I did not think about that. It's just kind of pointing people to where they can explore Alex. And then you should have gotten an email from me or have my email. You can always email me anytime or book that 10-minute call too. And Sophie's actually dropped a free 7-day trial in for everybody on here for Alex. So make sure to pick that up. We'll leave the chat box open for a bit so you can grab at any of those links that you have. Suzanne, thank you as always. I always laugh. I always take some good notes and I always leave with something practical. Appreciate you taking the time with us. To everyone else, have a fantastic rest of your weekend for those attending live, and we'll see you in the next one. Thanks, everybody.
So they